All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Monday, September 11th. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. I'm doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Clayton, let's never forget that this was the weekend that is the Warner Brothers horror slot after Labor Day. So never forget that because that is the weekend we're going to be covering. So, we got the Nun and we got to talk this Nun and we got to talk this big fat Greek threequel. So I think let's get into it. And in remembrance of Warner Brothers Horror Slot, let's do a plow for the weekend of Friday, September 8th.
Number one, The Nun 2 made $32.6 million in its first weekend. Number two, The Equalizer 3 made $12.1 million, down 65%. No theater change. It is at $61.8 million in its second weekend. Number three, another newbie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 made $10 million in its first frame. Number four, Jawan made $6.1 million in only 813 theaters. Its total gross is $7.5 million in its first week. Number five, Barbie made $5.9 million, down 42%. It lost 305 theaters. It's at $620.5 million in its eighth weekend. Number six, Blue Beetle made $3.7 million, down 47%. It lost 53 theaters. I'm sorry, 530 theaters.
Mm.
It is at $63.7 million in its fourth weekend. Number seven, Gran Turismo, based on a true story, made $3.3 million, down 49%. It hemorrhaged 1,091 theaters. It is at $35.6 million in its third weekend. Number eight, Oppenheimer made $3 million, down 48%. It lost 452 theaters. It's at $315.1 million in its eighth weekend. Number nine, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Madness, $2.6 million, down 44%. It lost 455 theaters. It is at $111.3 million in its sixth frame. And number 10, Bottoms made $2 million, down 33%. It added 550 theaters. It's at $7.6 million in its third week of release. That is your top
So,
10.
so Clayton, thank you for that plow. That was an excellent plow. We'll never forget that plow. So, yeah, looking at this top 10, we're going to get into, of course, the two newbies, but looking at some of the holdover stuff, I mean, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mutant Mayhem, you did pause on that one because I think you slightly surprised to see that this movie is now at $111 million domestic? I mean, it's a success that has a little bit gone under the radar. We haven't really talked about it much since the first weekend. Obviously, it's been out for a while, but I
Mm-hmm.
think good on these turtles and good on Seth Rogen and the creative team that have gotten this franchise back on track. I would say, though, it's never ever fully off track, the turtles.
Out of the Shadows did poorly.
It did 82 million domestic total. You're right. So that was an underperformer. I mean, looking at the history, I've got the franchise up. The movie franchise starting in 1990. This is now the number 3 biggest domestic earner of the franchise. The biggest is the first Michael Bay Ninja Turtles movie in 2014. The second biggest all time is the original movie, the Corey Feldman 1990 Ninja Turtles. But
Uh-huh.
now sitting at number 3 domestic is this Seth Rogen 2023 Ninja Turtles at 111 million domestic. And that's where it's going to end up. It's not going to get to the 135 million domestic that the 1990 movie got to, but I would say about as successful as they could have hoped for. I don't think they
Oh,
thought this movie would get to the Michael Bay movie in 2014 got to 191 million. That was never on the table for this movie, but this is a success.
this is absolutely a successful reboot, reimagining of this IP.
Yeah.
It's setting up for another movie, which will happen.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this thing could get a best animation Oscar nom nom nom.
It definitely could. I mean, right now it feels like Spideyverse, Spidey cartoon is the front runner
Yeah,
to,
it's a
I mean, I
slam
don't know.
dunk to win probably, but just to be nominated, I think that'll be good for this movie.
Yes. Yeah, if this movie gets in there, and Super Mario Brothers just on box office alone should get an Oscar nom for best animated film. But yeah, Ninja Turtles is a full-on success. I mean, at this point, Blue Beetle, Gran Turismo were full-on disasters. Blue Beetle
Oh,
63
Turismo
million.
especially, because when I
Yeah.
looked at that 35, I was like, "Oh my, it's only made 35 in 3
Yeah.
weekends."
Yeah, that's bad.
It's a terrible disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that 35 million domestic, there's a world in which you would have thought at some point, like when they greenlit that movie, I think they were hoping to get to 30 million opening weekend. 30
Yeah.
something million opening weekend. That's what you want out of a movie you've spent that much. And this is supposed to be the age, this is the dawn of video games overtaking comic book movies as the pop culture phenomenon, the movie phenomenon. Obviously, this is the beginning stages of it, but Gran Turismo, the movie, should have been able to ride that initial wave to a much bigger box office run. This 35 million is disgusting. Let's just say it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, and I was, as you said, disgusted by Gran Turismo because I don't know what I thought. I thought maybe it'd be at 40 at this point, but yeah,
Yeah,
this thing was a disaster.
it's a
Nothing much to
disaster.
talk about with it.
No. All right, so I want to throw something out here that we didn't talk about this on our preview episode. Our last episode was, of course, with Brett of the New Flesh, our chief horror correspondent. Great man. Hashtag horror lifestyle. We talked about The Nun too. We talked about My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 and our predictions, but we never said the name of what ended up being the number 4 movie at the box office this weekend, which is called Jawan. And
Jawan.
this and honestly, it's a huge failing on our part that we didn't, because we got an email earlier that day from
Mhm.
wannabe oh boy Marcus, who in the past has been incredible at tipping us off about anime films, foreign films. He's the guy who lets us know, hey, here's a box office story that's coming your way that might not be on your radar. And he did send us that the day of our preview show, and we just uh, 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 you know, we in the words of Robert De Niro, we blew it. We blew it. There's not enough. They don't give you enough napkins in this place.
Yeah.
And he did tip us off. So I'll just say that day he said, writing into mention, there's a foreign film that could be an interesting story at the box office this weekend. That's Jawan. And he did predict this movie. He said, I'm going to go 8.6 million for the 3-day opening. So that was Marcus's prediction. We did not end up using that information in our prediction, but this didn't get to the 8.6 he threw out there, but it made 6.1. So I mean, honestly, he nailed it in the sense that this was a movie that was going to be in the top 5.
Oh yeah, it made some moves. It did
Yeah.
some business, and yeah, I think we're so deep into the horror stuff, the
Yes.
horror that was The Nun 2, the horror that was My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, that we
Right.
kind of overlooked this film. And you're
Yes.
right. I mean, it was right. Marcus gave us all the clues.
Yes. Yes. Mr. Box Office Man, I gave you all the clues. That is basically what Marcus is saying right now. But yeah, I mean, Jawan is a movie that neither of us have seen. It seems to be a action spectacle. I'm sure the fight scenes are incredibly choreographed and just hard hitting. And anyone who saw it, I'm sure, had a great time, got what they were hoping for, I assume. But we have not seen this film, may not end up seeing this film. But I think the
May
takeaway
not.
uh,
I mean, I'm not seeing this.
you're not seeing it. Well, we'll get to some news on movies that you should be seeing. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think the story of something like Jawan is, it is a movie that sold popcorn this weekend, that got an audience into theaters. And it's not everything has to be $100 million spectacle. Not everything has to be a $40 million plus opening weekend to be successful. We need more films like this. Just more
Yeah.
films that super serve an audience, get someone who maybe otherwise wouldn't have gone to the movies this weekend out to a movie theater, buying popcorn, buying goobers, buying 78-ounce Coca-Colas and downing it all and paying $40 each for the experience. That is what a movie like Jawan does. It gets
Mhm.
new people to the movie theater. So thank you to this movie. And thank you, Marcus, for tipping us off. Even if we didn't use it, it was helpful to get that
Yeah.
email.
And definitely keep sending your great emails and sending us this information. We won't always be so, neglectful when it comes to them.
Yes.
We do appreciate your boots on the ground and your hard work.
Yes. Yes. And the main thing is you're getting the credit now of basically nailing your prediction.
Yeah.
You nailed it. So I think, is there anything we want to get into before we get into one of the top two movies? I mean, Bottoms is at number 10. It expanded. It's
Mhm.
at 7.6 million total after making 2 million this week. It's hard to get a read. I mean, I think we could safely say it doesn't feel like this movie is going to break out. I mean, maybe it still goes on a great series of holds, but where are you right now on Bottoms? You were big on Bottoms, big Bottoms last week. Give me your
Mhm.
Bottoms update.
I'm a little bit, I'm not as big on Bottoms as I was. Seeing this 33% drop with an addition of 550 theaters, you would hope that you would have seen a lower drop or even maybe an increase here if this thing was going to break out.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying it's over for Bottoms, but Bottoms isn't looking like it's going to do Buffa Bobo or have some sort of crazy run at this moment. So, but
Hmm.
eyes are still on Bottoms. I'm always looking at Bottoms and watching Bottoms and
Hmm.
seeing if there's legs attached to the Bottoms.
Right.
I
Right.
will still be looking at Bottoms for
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
to
And
to
you're a
to
Bottoms
judge any
feeder.
movements.
Hmm.
So to judge the movements. But I think that's something that we have to look forward and
Hmm.
see in the next few weeks. What is Bottoms doing?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of at almost exactly the same pace as Bodies was last
Yeah.
year. I mean, this movie's at Bottoms is at 7.6 million after its third weekend, where the first weekend was very limited. And Bodies after 3 weekends, in which the first weekend was very limited, was at 7.4 million. The difference is Bodies was in 2,500 theaters in its third weekend, whereas Bottoms is still only at 1,200 theaters. So the per screen
Yeah.
average for Bottoms is much higher. People are
Mhm.
going to this per capita at a much higher rate than they were Bodies. This movie is definitely more popular.
And liked, and I think the
Yeah,
difference too with Bodies getting more traction or more theaters is it's an A24 movie. So that has a cachet. There are people who go and see every A24 movie no matter what it is.
right, right.
There's a
Well,
fashion sense to it. There's a style to that where you
right,
say, "Oh, I'm an A24 fan."
right,
Nobody's saying I'm an Orion MGM fan.
right. Well,
So
mhm,
this is not breaking out in the way an A24 can because MGM is not a sexy
yeah,
place to release your movie, or Orion isn't a sexy place to release your movie in
right.
2023.
Right. And Bodies, speaking of A24, was sold as like many A24 movies are with their trailers, as a fake horror movie. A lot of people went to that movie thinking they were getting a horror movie, which of course
Mhm.
Bodies wasn't. And Bottoms is just a comedy, which is great. We love that. But
Mhm.
just a comedy, quote unquote, is a much tougher sell than, hey, maybe this is a horror movie.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and Bottoms has no aspect of maybe this is a horror movie to it, which I mean, maybe they should have just faked it and pretended it's a horror movie, but they
Mhm.
didn't do that. And
So, I think the other movie before we talk about the newbies is I just wanna mention The Equalizer 3's 65% drop, which is
yeah,
pretty bad.
mm,
But the thing with this is it's already at 61. It's gonna make its 100, I'm sure, because there's not really much that it's going to be battling against in the next few weeks. And football season kicked off, and one of the things that I thought was there's gonna be a lot of people watching the games, sweating, thinking they're gonna lose their houses, thinking that their wives are gonna leave them,
Right.
thinking that, bad men are gonna come after them
Mm.
during this weekend, that they didn't really feel the need to go to see The Equalizer 3 because they're thinking, "Oh, I gotta make sure that I can, pay my electric bill tomorrow after these games."
Right. They're thinking, "I might get my head caved in sometime later today by a bookmaker, or bookmakers,
Yeah,
heavy. I'm not in the mood to go see Denzel Washington cave someone's head in."
exactly, because that could
It'll
be
feel too
me.
close to home. That could be me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think by the second weekend of the NFL, these guys, they've either got their heads caved in,
Mhm.
these gambling addicts, they've got their heads caved in, or it didn't happen, and now they're feeling free and clear
Oh,
again.
they're too confident
Yeah, yeah,
next weekend.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But they're going to see Equalizer 3 next weekend because they didn't get their head caved in from gambling debt. So now they're feeling good. Go out to a movie.
Yeah, so we'll see if this stabilizes
Yeah.
next weekend.
I mean, looking at, as a comp,
Mhm.
Equalizer 2 in its second weekend dropped 61%. So
Okay.
around the same, a little less, a little better hold than the 65% drop of Equalizer 3 this weekend. But after its second weekend, Equalizer 2 was at 64 million total. After its second weekend, Equalizer 3 is at 61 million. So I
Yeah.
will say the 100 million is no longer a slam doink. You
Okay.
know,
It's not
I think
assured.
it's not a short. I think 90 is a doink. I
Uh-huh.
think 100 starts to become iffy depending on the results of the third weekend of Equalizer 3.
You know what? I'm going 100 for my man Denzel. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
He's Mr. Consistency. I am not going to question that until it happens. I do
Mhm.
think this thing goes to 100.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And you
there's also the whole thing of, does Sony, unless this totally bottoms out and it has no chance, if this movie's hanging around, 98 million, 99 million, Sony probably lets it play as long as it needs to, does some drive-in stuff, does something to
yeah,
get
yeah,
it to
pushes
100.
it over.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah.
would think. So yeah, not a great hold, but week 3 is going to be like, does it equal out? We will
But
find out.
here's a thing that's, and I'm not making excuses for Denzel just because I think he's a great man, but he is a butts in the seats movie star. He
Right.
brought people to the
Yes.
theater last weekend, and that's what a star does is open a
Yes.
movie.
Yes.
He
100%.
opened this
Mhm.
movie. Whatever happens afterwards, as William Goldman says, that's not really has to do with the star as much
Yep.
because the people who ran out to see Denzel ran out to see this movie, and he had a great opening weekend. So
Yeah.
he's still butts in the seats. And even if this movie doesn't make 100, that does not take anything away from him because so few people can get you to a theater
Yes.
the first weekend.
Yes. 100%. I
And
totally agree.
oh, sorry, you continue, but
No,
I was
go
going to
for
do a
it.
transition.
Do a transition.
Who is not a butts in the seat star is the
Who?
nun.
Wow. You're going after the nun. I mean, go for it. Take her down. Take her down.
I'm not necessarily taking her down. I'm just saying the nun is not a star.
Okay.
We've definitively figured that out. Not that
Okay.
this nun had to do better than the opening weekend of the first one, or even much more than this. I just don't think the nun is ever going to live up to the idea of what the nun could be. Because you're reading
Mm.
articles where the director's saying people wanted the movie to be gorier. Like, I think it's like the nun is a cool image, but there's nothing behind it.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
You know, Freddy was the son of 1,000 maniacs.
Right.
The nun is a dead nun that looks
Mm.
scaly. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough when your franchise starts from a painting, and that is the
Mhm.
basis of The Nun. The Nun was a painting and a Conjuring movie that then became an attempted movie franchise.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it started as just a single image, um, and it is one of those things where people imagine what they wanted their nun to be, like you said, and this nun rather tried to be all things to all people and does kind of
Mhm.
feel like it's nothing to everybody at this point.
Yeah, I mean, down what, 39% from the original.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, Deadline, listen, we love Anthony Diaz for Disney, D'Alessandro,
Mhm.
but he says, you know, Formiga and Storm Reed weren't able to do any events. It's like, who cares? No offense to either of these people. They are lovely people, I'm sure, or they're horrible people and we don't know. I don't know
Right.
celebrities, so I'm not sure what they're like personally, but they
Right.
don't come off offensive to me. What I'm
Right.
saying is that it doesn't matter that they didn't eat the hot wings for this movie. It's all about the nun.
Yeah.
It's all about the nun, and people are saying, "Ah, the first one was bad, and the second one, we gave it a little bit of a chance, but not a huge chance." So I do think Nun stops at 2. You gotta stop Nun at 2.
You mean making? I mean, this movie made 32.6 million. I think there's no chance we don't get a Nun 3. Now, Nun 3 will make probably half of that in an opening weekend, and I think everyone knows it. But I mean, you think this opening weekend is a franchise stopper for The Nun? We've
No, I
had
mean,
we've had like 4 Darkman movies. There was probably been 3 Dr. Giggles. They're gonna make a Nun
here's
3.
what okay. The Darkman movies, only the second one I think was in theaters. I think the rest of
True.
them are straight to video, and Dr. Giggle, same thing. So we're not talking direct to video here. Yeah,
Mhm.
if there's a Nun 3 that's a direct to, where would this go? It's
Peacock. Oh, no, no,
Peacock,
Max or Max if it's Warner
Max.
Brothers
It's
Max,
Warner
yeah.
Brothers. If it's direct to Max, that's not the same thing.
Mhm.
I don't, I think that this Nun keeps disappointing people, and you might be right, and I may be crazy, but The Nun 3, if it happens, which you're saying is a slam dunk, it's definitive that it will,
I mean, if
in
this
your
drop
mind?
okay, listen, we'll see how this run goes. If Nun 2 drops like 70% the next weekend, and next weekend it makes like 10 million on its way to this thing topping out at like 50 million total, yeah, then maybe this franchise is dead. That is honestly possible, but a movie that opens at 32 million and I would imagine doesn't have a big budget because Vera Farmiga's sister and Storm Reed, I don't think are getting 20 million each for this movie. So I would imagine the budget on this is not huge. So a $32 million opening weekend does make me think there'll be another one, but I could be wrong. This thing could obviously totally bottom out and not even get to 50 million domestic. So
So let's dig into the numbers then.
let's dig in.
So, well, this is letters, but we'll get to the numbers after we do letters. Nun 2 got a C plus, and it's a little bit better than the C the original got, so they liked it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But 64% positive and 47% recommend from post track. So not great.
Mm-hmm.
More female than male, 52%. 67% of the audience between 18 to 34, which is good. So,
Mm-hmm.
and biggest demo being 18 to 24, which is great. That's
Mm-hmm.
38%.
Mm-hmm.
Diversity, Latino and Hispanic, 43%.
Wow.
Caucasian, 26%. Black, 12%. Asian, 18%.
Wow.
So I'm coming around now to this being something that is going to get a third one because when you have this turnout, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're guaranteed that there's going to be an audience for this. Like
Right.
43% Latino and Hispanic. they will come for the Nun 3.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
mean, you might see the other demographics like trickling off of this, but like if they are able to put out a 3 in a few years and it opens to 25, that'll be good business depending on what the budget is. Because I like you said, I don't think either of those stars are going to ask for so much money that you can't keep this at a decent budget.
Right. And you don't need anyone to come back in this movie other than the nun herself. And as we talked about with Brett from The New Flesh, he was telling us that they're already stiffing the person who plays the nun on money. So Warner
Yeah.
Brothers definitely knows how to right or wrong. They know how to keep this movie cheap. The only
That's
thing
a
that they need is the image of the nun that we saw in that painting. Everyone else could go as it relates to this franchise.
if nothing makes you think that these companies are heartless, look at them not paying a nun.
Yes,
It's a
they're not.
nun.
It's a
Versus you
nun.
can say whatever you want about the Catholic Church in general or whatever, the power structure. But a nun,
A nun. Pay your nun. Pay your
pay your
nun.
nun.
Yeah, pay your nun.
You
But
gotta
they're
pay
not
your
going to pay
nun.
their nun, and I think that means that a threequel is more likely because they're just going to stiff their nun,
Hmm.
and that's all you really need to make this movie. But back to this nun, like you said, Denzel is a butts in the seats movie star. The nun, it's. I mean, that kind of drop from the first one to the second one. The nun is a fading star. If she ever was a star in the first place, this nun is now a fading star. It's a star on the decline. Art the Clown is a star on the rise. 1
Hmm.
to 2, massive jump. But for the nun, 2 to 1, big decline.
Well, and also, does this thing plummet next weekend? That's the question. Does this thing have a 65% drop? Does this thing have a 70% drop? Or does it have a decent hold, which for a horror movie would probably be what, in the low 50s?
Yeah. I mean, the original Nun in 2018, September of 2018, its second weekend drop on basically the same exact weekend 5 years ago was 66%. And that's coming
Yeah.
off a movie, obviously a much bigger opening, but a movie that had way more hype than this Nun.
Hmm.
So I think Nun 2 is going to fall off the face of the earth.
Wow. Off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be, if not 66, higher. Like,
Okay.
and obviously we have to get to our weekend preview later in the week, but it does feel like this was a bit of a Tomb Raider trap situation, coined by the
Hmm.
great Scott Mendelson, and uh that's what this feels like here, is that people went to see that original Nun, didn't like it that much. Second one was made, and I don't know. I mean, the second one feels like it's marginally better. This doesn't feel like it's some kind of giant step up in quality.
No.
But either way, people got, or the Meg. I mean, look at the Meg. Also, in terms of the opening weekends, there was that drop. People got what they wanted out of the first one. And when it
Hmm.
came to the second one, this isn't an Austin Powers 2 where the interest increased. The interest has clearly decreased since the
Yeah.
first one. So I don't know. Yeah, this Nun. Um, does this feel like it means anything when it comes to horror movies the next month? I mean, Exorcist Believer is obviously similar to The Nun, in which there's a lot of religious imagery to the horror. Does that matter? The Nun sort of being
No.
less popular, does that matter for The
These
Exorcist?
these these Warner Brothers prestige horrors always seem separate from the Halloween releases.
Mm.
They
Mhm.
just seem a little bit more. I don't. They're not classier because they're not, but they just
Mhm.
feel like they're outside of that in the way that I don't think their success dictates any success for a movie in October.
Mhm.
Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I just feel like the Warner Brothers is counter programming to the summer stuff, and Shocktober is when you really want to go for the true gore, the slashers,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know, those sort of things. I think it's just a separate feel, like your Saws,
Right, right. My Saw for sure. Saw
your Saw.
X coming soon. So, no, I agree. Another comp, I think, to The Nun, and especially as we talk about there being a part 3, is Warner Brothers' It franchise. Because obviously the It movies were on a much bigger box office scale. That first one did 700 million worldwide, 328 domestic. But It 1 came out 2017, opened to 123. It 2, 2 years later, opened to 90 million. So like a 25% drop in the opening weekend. So similarly, less interest in the second one than the first one. And there hasn't been an It Chapter 3. And I know that's a different thing in the sense that the second movie kind of closes the story there, and
Mhm.
the second movie ends what was covered in the Stephen King book. But I am kind of shocked that we have not gotten an It Chapter 3, considering how big those first two movies were. So if you didn't get an It Chapter 3, maybe you never do get a Nun Chapter 3. You
Well,
know,
the
Warner
problem
Brothers.
with well, the problem with It Chapter 3 was
Mhm.
that people don't like the adult stuff in it ever. Like, it was always about the kids,
It's always
right?
about the kids. Yeah.
Even in the original television movie, like, people wanted to see the kids, they didn't really wanna see the adults. So I think
Right.
that's the problem, is that what you're left with is a lot of adults in 3, and everybody just liked the kids, especially because of the Strangers thing phenomenon and everything. So I do think that the reason we didn't see 3 is not just because they don't have a chapter in the book that is further than what we had. It's because nobody wants to see the adults in it. They wanna see the
Sure.
kids.
But like with The Nun, like with any horror franchise, all that matters is the horror icon. So you could make an It Chapter 3 and just send Pennywise to France, and he's messing with a different group of kids. Like if they want to make another It movie, it's just where do you put Pennywise? And same thing with The Nun, it's where do you send The Nun if you want to make a Chapter 3? And maybe Warner Brothers is
Miami.
send them both to Miami. Send the Nun to Miami, send Pennywise to, I mean, the Nun getting to hobnob with It would be a huge deal for the Nun, but I don't think that's going to happen. You don't see too many crossovers with these Warner Brothers horror movies, but yeah, Warner Brothers might just be, and listen, they're cash poor. We know that right now, even with the success of Barbie, Warner
Mhm.
Brothers Discovery is just pinching pennies over there. They're trying to rub two nickels together and hope it turns into a quarter.
Mhm.
And maybe they just don't have enough cash to bankroll another Nun movie. Who knows?
It's possible. I don't know. I mean, so we'll see how this thing holds. I think that's always, that's always sort of, we say that a lot, but it's very true. It's like legs are important. I mean,
Yeah,
opening weekend is very important, but legs are just as important. So
yeah,
what the Nun does next weekend will tell the tale for the Nun 3.
yeah. Here's a weird thing I will say about this Deadline article before we move off of the Nun is I don't know if this showed up on your radar, but Anthony D is for Warner Brothers Discovery, maybe.
Okay.
Anthony D. Alessandro says, after talking about how The Nun, sort of declined from the first movie, he then says, still, thank you, Warner Brothers. The results here for the marketplace is better than the doldrums we had a year ago when Disney opened 20th century's horror title Barbarians to 10.5 and what was an awful overall weekend box office of 43.1 million. So he's talking about the same weekend a year ago.
Mhm.
The still thank you, Warner Brothers. I don't quite understand that because thank you for releasing the Nun 2 as opposed to,
What?
I
Using it
guess,
as a
putting
cut? Like, what would, was it, were you ever gonna put this straight to Max? No.
right, right. I don't get this thank you. It's like thanking the mailman for delivering your mail. I mean, I guess you could do it, but that is, that's what the mailman does. And what Warner Brothers does is release movies and release
Well,
horror films on September.
kind
Yeah,
of, but they moved Dune. So I think maybe, and listen, we shouldn't have to decode, listen,
yeah,
Anthony Diaz for decoding your deadline article, but maybe what he's saying is thank you for not moving all of your movies. Is that
right.
maybe a thing where it's like they thought that since Formiga couldn't go on Lad Bible and eat, the English toffee and shit, that they would have moved this thing.
Hmm.
Is it sarcastic? Is he being sarcastic? Because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. We know when he's being like catty, but we're not sure when he's being sarcastic.
I think he's being genuine. I think he's
Okay.
genuinely thanking Warner Brothers. And maybe you're right. Maybe there was some kind of thought that they would have moved the Nun to next year, but
Why?
The Nun is not SAG. The Nun, they could have thrown a Nun on the soon to cross the picket line Drew Barrymore show to promote
Oh.
this movie. They could do that. They could listen. Drew Barrymore show is gonna need some non-SAG guests, so just send the Nun out there to talk for an hour straight and fill up some airtime. So that Warner Brothers could do that. There was never a reason why they would move the Nun 2 to next
Hmm.
year.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, I mean, Anthony will not talk to us. Not that we've really reached out in any genuine way, but I'm
Right.
assuming he won't talk to us. So we might not get to the bottom of this. But if anybody can decode Anthony D is for,
Don't be on the BO boys.
yeah, Alessandro, let us know.
Yeah.
I do. I don't want to feel like I'm chomping at the bit here to talk about my Big Fat Greek Wedding
Mhm.
3, but I kind of am because
Go, Chomp, go.
it did overperform at least our modest
Mhm.
sort of prognosticating for it. I know you especially
Yep.
thought this thing would be in the dumpster. You said this could cry macho, which of course for all the new fans out there, all the stoolies, all the minifans, all the stifties and swifties,
And
that is around
Stoofies.
no stoofies. This is around like 4.2. That did not happen. It did twice that at
Mhm.
$10 million. And demos, very interesting, skewed, very old,
Okay.
and very Caucasian.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
going to
not
it
to be
right now.
unexpected. Yeah.
So 72% women,
Wow.
over 55 being the largest demo, diversity demos, 53% Caucasian, 28% Latino and Hispanic, 5% Black, and 14% Asian. So big Caucasian audience for this film,
Mhm. Mhm.
and very old.
Very old. Very, very old. How much over 55 years of age was that?
Well, 24% was over 55.
Wow. That is very old. And I say that with no judgment other than that is very, very old.
Well, just to
Very
give
old.
people an understanding
Of just
on
how
this
old that
show,
is.
on this show, and when we talk about demos for movies, a 35-year-old is old.
Yes, yes. A 35-year-old is old for a movie. I mean, over 55 is a mega oldster. That is the
Yes.
official term in box office for 55 and up is a mega oldster. So a
Yes.
quarter of their audience was mega oldsters.
Mhm.
These are people who have to get a signed release from a living facility to be allowed to go see this movie, which does show the drawing ability of this movie. There
Mhm.
is a percentage of those mega oldsters that had to be allowed to leave a facility to go see it. And that's paperwork. Me and you go see a movie at this point in our lives, there isn't paperwork involved to be allowed to go to the theater.
No, no. We don't have to write our next of kin down.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we don't have to get, medic alert bracelets turned on to be able to go see our movies yet. Someday, yes, but not yet. But a quarter of the My Big Fat Greek Wedding Part 3 audience had to have that happen. They had to replace batteries in their medical alert bracelets.
So now B cinema score, which was down from A minus for the second film.
Oh, wow.
So people didn't like it as much, but this is the
No.
hardcores. So the hardcores definitely were saying, okay, maybe not as good as the second one, but it's not like it got a C or a D or an F. I mean, this thing, if it got an F, this is a must see. But getting
Right.
a B minus, I'm sorry, a B means that it's probably like a middling entry into the franchise. But
Mhm.
I'm thinking this thing drops like a stone next weekend because this really feels like the hardcores came for it. They really did. And nobody else is going to see this movie.
Well, I mean, it with a movie that's so older skewing, that kind of audience usually does wait a little bit
Uh
more.
huh.
So, I mean, if this is an audience that's gonna skew to mega oldsters, and again, people who have to get signed out of living facilities in order to go see it, that kind of paperwork sometimes doesn't go through immediately. you
Yeah.
know, Next of kin, uh, letters from a lawyer's office sometimes take a few days. So there's people who probably want to see it who just aren't allowed out to see it until the second weekend, third weekend. So it may hold better
They didn't get the
than we
proper
think.
releases. Yeah. Well,
Right.
let's see. What's Book Club 2? This obviously opened higher than Book Club 2, which was frankly a disaster. Book Club The
Yeah.
Next Chapter. I'm sorry. My
Yeah.
apologies. Opened to 6.6. And so this opened higher.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But,
so it's a stronger franchise for sure.
I mean, that the thing is that the first movie in this franchise is just an undeniable Goliath. But
Hmm.
so Book Club dropped 55% in its second weekend. This is the second chapter, the next
Hmm.
chapter, I'm sorry. So
Hmm.
we'll see how this stacks up to something like Book Club. Are we looking at a 55% drop? Are we looking at higher?
Hmm.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. So something I was talking to my mom today. We were talking about the upcoming movie slate. Um, just quickly, the movie that she is, and I mentioned this to you off mic at BOHQ Clayton. The movie she has pegged for the movie she's most excited about seeing in theaters this fall is The Bike Riders. She saw
Mhm.
that trailer this weekend, and that's a movie she told me you have to take me to see that. And the reason she said is Austin Butler. Quote, she
Mhm.
said, he is just so good looking. That is what my
Yeah.
mom said. And she's someone who doesn't need to be signed out of any facility. She could go see a movie anytime she wants, middle of the
Yes.
night, middle of the day. She's able to do that legally, physically, which is great. So she could go see that. So she's excited about The Bike Riders. When I brought up My Big Fat Greek Wedding Part 3, she said she'd seen both of the other two movies. She said, I feel like I could wait for that to be on cable. And she didn't say
Okay.
streaming, it's cable. So she might be waiting until this thing's on TBS.
Okay,
She's
so she's waiting 3 or 4 years.
yes, yes, and totally fine with it. There's no
Yeah.
Austin Butler in My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
She's not
Austin
a big,
Butler,
Joey Fatone fan?
no, he's not quite the draw to her that the guy who played young Elvis is.
Mhm.
Young Elvis, she is seeing that opening weekend, Big Fat Greek Wedding Part 3, whenever it gets to cable, which may not exist by the time My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 would even get to cable. But
Mhm.
the other thing she mentioned about this movie is she goes, "Oh, and the isn't it a shame the guy who played the dad in the first two movies is dead."
Yeah, he
Those were her
died, and
only
this
yeah.
is a tribute to him, this movie. They go to Greece to go to his I think this is they go to his, like, birth town?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe that's the or it could not be that at all. They might just go to Greece because, they got a Groupon or something.
Right, right. But I think you're right. I think it is in memory of, and that may be the real life thing. This actor died, Michael Constantine died, and
Mhm.
so they wanted to pay tribute to him with this movie. That is just not the type of draw to a movie-going audience. The funeral of an old man who
Yeah.
in real life has passed. That is
Mhm.
not the same draw as these two people are falling in love, which is what the first movie was about. And I think that's not a draw to young people who want to see people fall in love in a movie theater. It's
Yeah.
also not a draw to old people. Old people don't necessarily want to go to a movie, flock to a movie to see old people die. And obviously, a lot of old people went. That is the biggest percentage of this movie. But I think
Yeah.
more old people would have seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 if it was about young, hot people falling in love. My mom wants to go see the bike riders because Austin Butler is going to be hot and going to be getting into fights on a
Mhm.
motorcycle. She doesn't want to go see a movie about an old man dying of natural causes. That's not the same draw.
I can see that, absolutely, and I don't know, I haven't read the plot synopsis, but, is there even a wedding in this? There was a wedding in the first one, obviously, there was a wedding in the second one because the parents her parents, they never were officially married, and so
Mhm.
they actually get married, and so that's the wedding,
Right,
but
right.
I thought for sure that it'd be the 3rd one would be their kids getting married, but I think their kids are still in their early 20s, which is way too early to get married, kids. Don't do
Right.
it. There's no
Wait
reason
until
to.
wait until mid to late 40s for sure at this point.
Well, there's just really no wait till there's just really no other option, I think,
Right.
is the way to do it. That's what I'm doing.
Right.
And
Right.
so, till rent gets so high that it's like, I just gotta cohabitate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the premise, according to Wikipedia, of this film. And we both have watched a trailer for this, and this is how I remember it too. The film follows the Portocullis family on a trip to Greece for a family reunion after the death of Gus. So your log line of your movie has the phrase "the death of Gus" in it.
Mhm.
That and listen, we're talking about a movie that overperformed our expectations, but it's still a movie that is did not do well and is did not at all continue the audience of the first one or even the second movie. And I think having the phrase "the death of Gus" be the major plot point tells you everything you need to know. You know,
It'd be
come up with a
interesting.
way to frame this movie around people falling in love. I'm sorry. That is what you needed to figure out if you wanted to have a hit movie here. Get some hot young Greeks in love, not the death of Gus.
So you're saying that, unlike Gran Turismo that added based on a true story to its title, you wouldn't add, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, The Death of Gus.
I would not have done that. For
Okay.
sure. I mean, I think
They
the
haven't
death of
done that, so you
the,
wouldn't do that for Weekend 2.
no, I wouldn't pull a Birds of Prey where the second weekend that movie was called Harley
Harley
Quinn
Quinn, Birds of
Harley
Prey.
Quinn, Birds of Prey. I would not
Yeah.
retitle the marketing this week and have this movie be called Death of Gus, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
No, it'd be the other way around. Let's be serious. It'd be the other way around. I'm sorry, you do lead with Greek Wedding.
Right. Well, or
You're
like,
not gonna lead with Death of Gus.
I, uh, Birds of Prey led with Harley Quinn.
But
So
Harley
that's the
Quinn is Harley Quinn is the reason people would have gone to see that movie if it was any good. Gus is like an additional thing.
or I wouldn't do you mentioned Gran Turismo, that the official title of that ended up being Gran Turismo based on a true story.
Mhm.
So definitely do not change the title of this movie the second weekend to My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 based on the death of Michael Constantine. You
Yeah,
know,
that'd probably be bad.
that would be bad. I think that this movie was, I mean, the franchise was always going to keep going in a decline. We talked
Uh-huh.
about it last weekend. Nia Vardolas, who, God bless her, one of the greatest box office stories of all time with that first movie, and probably it will be shitting money the rest of her life because of how much money the first movie made. So God bless her. She didn't become a movie star from that movie, so
No.
her star power is not a big deal at this point in time. So this third movie was always going to continue to decline
Yeah.
from the first one, but I think the only way it could have surprised everyone and done much better than expected is it had to find hot young Greek stars to be in love, and that needed to be the central focus of this third movie.
Yeah.
Centering this movie on the death of Gus was never going to resonate with a young audience who want to see young people fall in love, or an old audience who do not want to see people who look like them die of natural causes.
Yeah. And listen, if it's any condolence or any sort of thing to help Nia Vardalos uh sleep at night, if it's any consolation was the word I was grasping for.
Yeah, yeah.
She will be, when we write the
Hmm.
book of box office history, she will
Yes,
be in those pages, and she will be prominently in those pages. And that cannot be said for a lot of actors.
100%. 100%. She's in the
You
book by
look
the
at the
BO Boys someday.
index, you're going to see in V, it's going to be like page this, page that. I mean, she might be in the intro. So it might be
Mhm.
page IX or whatever when the intro doesn't have actual page numbers, it has the Roman numbers or whatever.
Right, right, right.
She might be in the intro to this book because
Yes.
of the phenomenal success of My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
She may be, depending on what we approve as the final art for the cover of this book.
On it.
You could see a world in which the cover of our eventual book, Bidding War to Come for sure. So publishers
Mhm.
get ready. But when the BO Boys finally do write a book, the cover could be one of those covers where there's sort of line drawings of famous elements of box office. And you see a dinosaur from Jurassic Park, and you see the hair gel from There's Something About Mary. Nia Vardalos could end up, it would be a collage. At that point, there'd have to be a lot of figures in that collage, but there is a world in which Nia Vardalos is in that collage on the cover. And it's in a big like bucket of popcorn, and it's me and you holding a big bucket of popcorn, and the title of our book is in the bucket. Something like that. I'm
Well, I
spitballing here,
really hope
obviously.
that you don't design the book cover is what I would say, but I know what you
You
mean.
know what I mean? And it's like I'm pulling a piece of popcorn out of the bucket of popcorn, and maybe that's Nia Vardalos' head. You know
Okay,
what I
that's
mean?
terrible idea. I mean, maybe if she was like holding onto the popcorn in like a fun way, but like it's not like devouring her head seems a little bit dark. I was
Well,
thinking more along the lines.
she's got little arms coming out of her head, and she's desperately trying to hold on to the edge of the
Well,
popcorn bucket.
desperately also it invokes that she's terrified, which I don't think is something that we'd want to invoke with our book cover. I was thinking more of like a Sergeant
She is
Pepper's
though. She is
homage.
terrified. She is terrified though.
And she should be. I would be. She should be. She's about to be
Mhm.
devoured by two large men. They're probably torn apart to be shared in a gruesome manner.
Yes,
But
yes. We do split all of the popcorn heads in half.
we do.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more of like a Sergeant Pepper's homage, right? Where it'd be a bunch
Mm.
of different
Mhm.
people from the box office past all together on a cover.
Yes, and we're the band leaders in the front. Yes, yes, that would
Yeah, and
cover
she's
too.
one of the people. She would definitely be on a Sergeant Pepper homage box office book history cover.
Yes, yes. So no matter what happens with this movie, it drops 80% next weekend, falls off the face of the earth, and there's never a fourth movie. She gets that. She either ends up on a Sergeant Pepper homage or a popcorn kernel being devoured. Either way, she's very possibly on the cover of our book someday. So that is
Mhm.
great for Nia Vardalos. This movie, all that to say, I was predicting 4 or 5 million and it did 10. So, I mean, we've been talking about this in the negative. Is there a positive about this opening weekend of My Big Fat Greek Wedding Part 3 as you see it?
It's a positive. because it went theatrical. It's positive
Yes.
because we were talking about popcorn. People,
Mhm.
like you said,
Mhm.
about Jawan. What Jawan? Jawan?
Jawan, yeah,
Jawan.
Jawan, yeah.
People went to a place, not their house,
Yes.
and saw
Yes.
this movie with other like-minded people.
Yes.
They left their domicile to experience movie going, and
Yes.
therefore they paid for the ticket and they paid for food and they had a great time, I'm sure. And now that this movie was actually in a theatrical a house of God, basically, which is what we look at as the theater, right?
Right.
It can now go to streaming and say it was a theatrical movie, and there's going to be more interest on PVOD as
Yep.
opposed to this, since its focus, it would have gone to Hulu.
Right. It would have got to Hulu. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then it's Vacation Friends 2, which we loved Vacation Friends 1, but guess who still hasn't seen Vacation Friends 2?
Either of us.
Me.
Yeah.
Neither of us.
Yeah.
So Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, I loved the second one. If it was on Hulu, I would never watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. And here is something great. When you look at this box office top 5 and even expand that to 10, it is what, we talk a lot about the good old days and, the 1990s, especially sort of the epitome of looking at any box office chart and seeing such variety and genres and star power and such. Look at this top 5. Number 1, you got a horror movie sequel. Number 3, you got an action movie with a big forever movie star in the center of
Mhm.
it. Number 3, you got a family comedy, with
Mhm.
an older cast that's serving an older audience. Number 4, you've got a foreign action film serving a foreign audience and just serving people who want to see an action movie. Number 5, you got a big budget sort of IP comedy movie with movie stars in it. That's been a big holdover from the summer with Barbie. Number 6, you got a superhero movie. Number 7, a video game movie. You got Oppenheimer, a big drama that's going to be up for an Oscar. That's a giant
Mhm.
blockbuster. Number 9, you got a family-friendly animated film. That's not even a Disney film, a non-Disney animated film. Number 10, you got a teen comedy. It
Teen
really
sex comedy.
teen sex comedy. When you look at this top 10, and listen, there's bombs in there, Blue Beetle and Gran Turismo, mega bombs, but there's a bunch of hit movies. There's different genres. There's only one superhero movie in the
Mhm.
top 10. Only one. There
Yeah.
is something to quote Anthony D. D'Alessandro, something to be thankful for when you look at the overall top 10 here. There is a nice variety of what's
Yeah.
out there. And especially that it's not 4 different MCU movies at the same time.
Yes. Thank goodness.
Not
Thank
to
goodness
beat
for
that
that.
horse, but yeah, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 didn't go to Streamo. It's a
Yeah.
movie serving an older audience, a comedy film that families could go to, that people are getting signed out of old age homes to go to, and it's in the movie theater. So that's great. That's great. It made $10
Yeah.
million dollars. It made double digits. Great job. And
Good
Nia Vardalos is going
for
to be on the cover.
it.
Um,
Yes.
so before we go, just something really quick, which is, we last week or a couple of episodes ago talked about, Clayton, whether you need to see the Taylor Swift film.
Okay.
So Taylor
Let's just get
Swift,
to this.
the Eras Tour, the movie,
Yeah.
coming out Friday, October 13th. Going to be a biggest movie of the fall. Could open at 100 million plus. Who knows? By the time we get
Will
close to
open
it,
100 million
Will
plus.
will open 100. This could be Barbie situation in which by the time we get to a few days out, this movie's tracking at 130, 140, 150. Who
Yeah.
knows? Either way, biggest movie ever. We were talking about, do you need to see this in the theaters? Because you have been much more, let's just say, selective about what you go to see in movie theaters.
Mhm. Yes.
You passed on a lot of the big summer movies.
True.
And we talked about, should you go see this? And we did put up a Twitter X poll on.
That great. Thank you for you should have led with that.
So, well, here we go. We put up a Twitter X poll, and by we I mean Wannabe senior intern Christopher,
Great
and
job,
Jack.
Christopher.
And I'm sure Jack, helped him, but we'll never know about it because he reports to Christopher. So,
Yeah.
we don't care.
A lot of
So,
Jack talk that I'm just not too happy about right now.
so the poll went up on at the BO Boys Pod on Twitter X, and the votes are in. And Clayton, 80%, 80% of the respondents did say Clayton needs to see the Taylor Swift movie in theaters. Only 20% said he did not have to see it.
Okay.
So
Was there only 2
80%,
options? There was only 2
only
options.
two options.
Okay.
Either you see in the theater or you don't see in the theater. 80% of the respondents, Clayton, you got to see in the theater. So you wanted a poll. You wanted to hear what the people thought, and the votes are in.
Yeah.
So, Clayton, I pose it to you. Do you go with the will of the people, or do you deny the will of the people? Do you deny the votes?
No. It was a clean voting process,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Twitter X,
Yep.
trusted source,
Yep.
right? Never been a bot on there. And so I say, yeah, of course. I mean,
Wow.
after we look into, uh, what the votes were, where they came from, was there any sort of like, shenanigans? Once I figure out that the votes are really votes and they are actually legitimate, then I will do what they say. And so that's up to Jack and that's up to Christopher to do a little bit digging to see, okay, was there bots involved? What was the situation
Wait a
here?
second.
Were there more people? Were there people voting twice or multiple times?
Wait.
Because I only take it if it's one per person vote, because that's fair. So, I mean, after
Wait.
like a very rigorous, listen, just after a very rigorous, you know, delving into this data and these numbers, I will go by what the poll says.
So you are, and I think I am glad this is being recorded right now because this is something that may end up in court, to be honest. But you are saying that you're out here talking to wannabe senior intern Christopher, talking to wannabe junior intern Jack,
No, I'm
and
not talking
telling
to
them to
Jack. I'm
look into
talking
it.
to Christopher. I'm talking to Christopher, and then he will tell Jack what I said to him.
Oh, okay. So you admit there when you talk to Christopher, you're implying he needs to talk to Jack, but you are
Yes.
telling the people who are meant to verify the votes. You're to wannabe senior intern Christopher who needs to verify these votes. You're telling him to look into it, but that is implying look into it in the way that you want it to come out.
No, that is not. That is your implication. What I'm saying
That
is,
is the
I want to
implication.
know. No, it's not. I want to know if the votes are legitimate. However, you figure that out, you figure that out. If it is truly 80-20 when they do the investigation, I will do it.
You're
Now, if
calling
it
for an
turns out
investigation.
that the investigation happens, there's some flim-flamming going on here, and it were to flip-flop, I would then also do what it says, okay? Once we figure out what the real votes were, then I
Okay,
will
so you're
actually
already
do.
saying these may not be the real votes.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying hypothetically, if there is some flim-flamming going on, then those votes that exist now are not the real votes. So therefore, there will be real votes that I can then take into account and go by, which I said I was willing to do, but I'm only willing to go by legitimate votes that have been rigorously checked.
Rigorously. So it needs to be rigorously checked.
Yeah, even if it is an easy process, it should be rigorous for Christopher. Like,
Okay.
it should be difficult even if it's easy. Do you understand what I mean when I
Who
say that?
who are these real votes in this Twitter X poll about whether you need to see the movie that
That's
you
for
plan
them
to
to
bring
find
in?
out. That's for Christopher to find out. I need to know who the real votes are. These could very well be the real votes. There is a very, I wouldn't say a large chance, but there's a chance that these votes are real. Okay. But if they're not real, I need to go by the real ones. That's all I'm saying. So
And
this is a lot of talk for something that is just how people do these things. Like,
how, in your mind, as you talk to your followers and as you talk to wannabe senior intern Christopher, who currently does, he reports to both of us, but it's a dotted line reporting to you. How likely do you think it is at this point that those are real votes that were cast?
why is that my worry? I mean, that's not my worry.
Okay.
I mean, here's the thing. I'm
You think
talented.
they are
That's
real
just the
votes?
facts, right?
Right.
So if they are, if they are, they are. But I'm not the one who's. It's not up to me to do that. It's not up
Okay.
to me to decide what's real and what's not real.
Right.
You
It's
know,
up to Christopher. And you give wannabe senior intern Christopher full authority to make this call, right? You will say right here
after a
on
rigorous
air.
process, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should have him on after he goes through the process of verifying these votes.
Okay. But it's up to him. His call is the final call. Because I will not in any way influence wannabe senior intern Christopher's call when
Well, why
he
would you even
well,
say you're not going to? That wasn't even a question, but now you're saying you're not going to. Why would you even bring it up?
well,
So
because I
now that
want to make
makes me
sure you're
think if
not
there's some
going to.
fishiness.
You're not going to.
No.
Okay. Great, great,
What
great. That's
influence
all.
would you have? That's the thing. If these are legitimate votes, you have no influence. So therefore, you even bringing up the fact that you're not going to get involved, what does that even mean? Why would you even bring that up?
I'm
Now,
not the
now
one who
I'm feeling like there's something going on.
I'm not the one who called for a rigorous investigation into a poll, which to
If
me
I'm going to
was
make a
just
life
already
decision,
verified. Yeah,
listen, I said I would make a decision that affects my life based on a X poll. Okay.
the Twitter X poll. Yes.
If that is the case, of course, I'm going to make sure that they're legitimate votes and
Hmm.
that each one only came from one verified IP address. That's all I'm saying. And
So
I don't think that's too much to ask.
wait, so wannabe senior intern Christopher now has to figure out he has to check IP addresses on this
Hmm.
poll, or else to you the vote is not legitimate.
And VPNs, they get thrown out.
So
Because
okay,
anybody could vote from any. If you say that they're anybody voting there, and it's someone could
well,
have a VPN, and they could hop around the globe and say Clayton needs to go see this movie. I don't find that to be fair.
international votes were always supposed to be legitimate votes.
Yeah, they're legitimate as long as it's not somebody that is in the continental United States that's voting in Sweden through a VPN. Then that's thrown out.
Yeah, I do think this is going to be a big issue because I
Not
just
for me.
trusted the poll and the election day results. I was always in favor of whatever was called on election day, which is what our
Doesn't
interns
matter
did.
what
Oh,
you do, you think, because it doesn't affect you, buddy boy.
I mean, I'm part of this show.
You
And
are.
I was trusting the election day results and the people who called it, and our interns called it. That was on our official prep document for this episode, is that they called it. And I fully supported their call, but it seems like you do not support their election day call for whether you should see the Taylor Swift film in
Uh,
theaters.
I say verify the IPs and I'm there.
Verify the IPs. All right, this is it. Has become something that I thought was an election day result announcement, but it is now a fully ongoing investigation and an ongoing story for future episodes of the BO Boys. And I have no choice but to cover this
There's no
story.
story. There's no story. This is something that can go on in the background while I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is talking about the box office.
Right, right, right. So you want this to happen in the background now. You don't want this to be covered.
No, there's no
And
reason it should be covered because you
yeah,
your coverage of it could affect the results because for some reason you're acting as if you have some sort of sway, which makes me leery. And
I have no sway. Neither of us should have any sway or exert any sway.
of
I
course
just want to
not. But you
cover this.
saying, "Oh,
I
I
just
won't
want to
get
cover
involved.
this.
I won't get involved." And it's like, yeah, no one asked you to, and no one thought there'd be a way for you to get involved until you said you're not going to get involved, which makes me think that you could get involved, which I don't want you to be involved.
Right. I'm just covering the story here.
Okay, great. That's fine.
So, more to come on this developing story, developing investigation, and whether the election day results will be honored and whether Clayton will indeed see the Taylor Swift The Eras Tour, the movie, in movie theaters. 80% of the popular vote says that he should. So, we will see. We will see. So,
At this time, it does.
at this
At
time.
this time.
So, listen, go to at the BO Boys Pod on Twitter X to witness these election day results as long as they are we do need to have screenshots of this to make sure that they are out there. So go to at the BO Boys Pod. Also, want to BO senior intern Christopher killing it with the vertical clips from the show on Twitter X, on TikTok. He's putting up clips, Clayton, on YouTube. So, of course, YouTube is where you could go to see full episodes of the BO Boys, but you could also find short segment clips up there that are horizontal. The vertical
Those are
clips on
popular.
TikTok and Twitter, horizontal segment clips on YouTube, along with the full episode. So, Wanna BO senior intern Christopher really earning everything he gets right now. Of course, also thank you to Jack for the research and prep docs and everything he's been providing the show, doing a bang up job according to Christopher. So that's great, and we have not had to speak to him once since he was on the episode. So that's
2
huge.
weeks, Jack
Yep.
free.
So of course, email us the BO Boys Pod at the BO Boys podcast at gmail.com is our email address. We love getting predictions, boots on the ground reporting. Just very quickly, Reed wrote us a scathing email, not about our show. He loves our show, but about Warner Brothers marketing for the fact that they have not been putting the Aquaman trailer with any movies so far this year. He says you could have attached the Aquaman trailer to the most successful movie of the year. He meant Barbie, or maybe the August superhero movie. He meant Blue Beetle, or maybe with a sequel to a successful horror series. Of course, he means The Nun 2 there. Or you could wait and put it with the biggest concert movie ever. But I guess putting the Aquaman trailer with the opening weekend of a Disney-produced third movie of a dying franchise was the way to go. Huh? Reed. So thank you, Wanna BO Boy Reed, for that scathing email about Warner Brothers and the fact that right now they are doing zilch to promote Aquaman 2 coming out in December.
Well, I don't want to get into it because we don't really have time, but
We
I
don't.
mean, they might not have known what that movie is in order to have a trailer ready for Barbie. I still think they probably don't even know what the movie is, and they're going to have a trailer out for Haunting in Venice. I mean, I think this thing is an absolute crapshoot slash possible disaster.
Yeah.
Aquaman
Well,
2.
it seems like Aquaman 2 trailer will be dropping with Haunting in Venice this weekend. I mean, we'll see. We'll believe it when we see a trailer for that movie, but who
But
knows?
I think 8 weeks ago they were like, "Wait, is like Momoa even still Aquaman? Who knows?"
Right. So we'll see. So yes, send us your emails to the BO Boys podcast at gmail.com. Predictions, boots on the ground reporting, and scathing emails about movie studios. We love getting all of that. Of course, YouTube, we're YouTubers, so subscribe to the YouTube channel. And the most important thing anyone could do for their fellow citizen is to go and give them 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. So if you are a listener of the show and somehow you haven't done it yet, go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review and then just write, love the show, blah, 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 and 5 stars. That's it. That's all you got to do for the BO Boys. We have earned that much for
And
sure.
can I just read really quickly a great 5-star review
Oh,
by
of course.
Michael Lind.
Of course.
Says new box office icons have arrived. These two guys, pretty sure it's Clayton and Pat, I'm not a stalker, have created one of the best podcasts of all time. They are now in my weekly BO rotation along with Grace Randolph. They deliver the
Okay.
Pixar lashings when needed and aren't beholden to corporate interests. My only
Wow.
criticism is they didn't give Gadja enough credit. Gadga enough credit for House of Gucci's box office performance, but nobody's perfect. Did I
Wow.
pronounce that name correctly? Godga?
I mean, who knows? And we'll never, ever know. So, yeah, I think that we've done it, Clayton. I think that that's all we could possibly do on this episode.
Oh, yes. I don't think there's anything left to say except for until next time.
Will
We'll
smell
smell
you
you
at
at
the
the